Welcome back to another episode of the Pro Series podcast. This is episode 87, and today's guest is Jeremiah Russell. He's an architect based out of Arkansas. He owns Rogue Architecture. We talk about his journey from working in an architectural firm to creating his own architectural firm. He gives advice on anybody who is trying to create their own firm or get out there on their own. We talk about side gigs turning into the main gig. So if you're struggling with your main gig and trying to get into full time with your side gig, this is a great episode to listen to. He gives great advice. We talk about the how interior design and architecture are very similar and how they're different. But this is a great episode. But before we get into the episode, please like, subscribe, and review this podcast on wherever you listen to podcasts. And now I hope you enjoy episode 87 with Jeremiah Russell. Jeremiah, thank you so much for coming on the Pro Series podcast today. Excited to talk to you and get your background on your company and how you started.
Absolutely, Eric. Thanks for inviting me. This is I'm looking forward to this. This is gonna be a lot of fun. Obviously, my name is Jeremiah, principal architect of Rogue Architecture. We're based out of Little Rock, Arkansas. I'm also licensed in a number of other states, so we're not sort of limited just to Arkansas. I've got currently active projects in Arkansas, District of Columbia, Virginia, and hopefully bringing on a couple of other projects in Florida and Connecticut as well. So we kind of, not that I'm licensed in all 50 states or ever plan to, but we do a little bit of work in all over the country. And so started my firm in 2014. Really, it was right after I got licensed. I think I was licensed for about 6 months when I hung my own shingle. And that was, as you can imagine, it was a terrifying experience, to go from a W-2 to a, write your own paycheck environment. That's, there's a little bit of a pucker factor there. Mm-hmm. But we've been in business now for 8.5 years, and it's been a great ride. And, I plan to keep going for as long as clients will keep trusting me with their work.
That's always good. So architecture, do you do homes, residential, or commercial, or a little bit of both?
So we do a little bit of both. Mostly our work has centered around custom single family homes. We've also assisted our clients with some interior design, but we also do a fair bit of commercial work as well as historic preservation. So that's actually how we got into more commercial work, was the historic properties that we were doing generally were commercial in nature, either old office buildings or one was a post office down in Benton, Arkansas. One was an old pharmacy with an apartment above. So, it sort of forced us to kind of spread our wings a little bit in design by taking on those projects. And so lately we've been getting into a lot more multifamily and affordable housing, which is really where one of my biggest passions lies, especially in affordable housing.
Gotcha. When did that start for you? Like your passion? Like I'm an interior designer. It started when I was younger, when my family was building a custom home. That's kind of where my design seed was planted. When did that start for you?
It was about the same. Okay. I think I'm not entirely sure how old I was, but I was young. And my grandmother and my mother took me shopping one day, and we were in a cab driving through a city, and there's only two things that I really remember about that day. One is getting yelled at for sticking my head out the window, and the other is for the reason I was sticking my head out the window is because I was looking up at all the tall buildings. And so I was an artist, from an early age. Did a lot of drawing, some cartooning and things like that. And so, architecture, obviously, design naturally lends itself to an artistic bent. Yeah. But I was also always just obsessed with buildings. The neighborhood that I lived in when I was a kid had a lot of houses that were being built at the time that we lived there. And so me and my friends, being the, degenerate hooligans that we were, we'd, sort of go to these construction sites after all the crews had left, and like, climb around in the houses that were being rough framed. We would like climb up on the roof and, get on the ridge beam and just have this, kind of panoramic view of our neighborhood. Probably not the safest thing. If OSHA is listening to this, hopefully the statute of limitations has run out. But so, I just love buildings, love construction. I love the interaction, the interplay between people and buildings, and how that affects us as a society in a wider context.
Yeah, that's it's so funny. Most of my guests I have on this, most people get this creative seed planted when they're younger. But when you talk about people outside of like the architecture, interior design, the creative fields, they don't know what they're going to do in life until like, after college or during college. I want to know the scientific behind that. Like, why do creative people always know what they want to do? Pretty, for the most part, it changes, but yeah, it sounds like you're the same way.
Yeah, that is a great question. I'm sure somebody's probably written a book about it.
Yeah.
You know, Obviously, as an architect, I talk to a lot of people, and as a business owner, it's required that I kind of get out there and meet a diverse group of peoples. And it's interesting to talk to people that are in other professions and hear what you've just talked about. I've got a friend of mine actually right now. He's a few years younger than I am, but he's a videographer, so and a photographer, so he's a creative person. But he just completely did a 180, and he's now in medical school, like pursuing, he wants to be a doctor now. And I'm just like, okay,
Wow.
but why? Other than the money,
Drastic
obviously. But
change.
yeah, very drastic change. But I don't know. I think creative people, people like us with just that artistic but also scientific mentality, because design design is an art, but architecture and construction is a science. So
Oh yeah.
you've got to be able to understand both. But I think it just lends itself to a certain determinism that you have to have in architecture and in construction design. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Sounds like it. Are you also interested in interior design too? Because I've had architects on here many times, and they want nothing to do with the interior design stuff. They'll have people on staff that are interior designers. Do you have a passion for that too? And do you do some of that work?
We do some of it. My wife will tell you that I'm not very good at it. But I, it's not that I don't want to do interior design. I think of it more as a team effort.
Hmm.
So, I would prefer to bring in an interior designer, not once everything is done and it's time for them to just sort of plug in materials and furniture. Interior design really needs to be something that's thought about from the beginning of a project, because it affects and it informs the space.
Yeah.
It's about much more than just color or fabric or texture or lighting. It's really it is the function and flow of the space. Now, obviously, as an architect, I'm designing interior spaces. Whether it's a new home, a remodel, or an office, or I don't know, a medical clinic, whatever. We're designing the experience of the people in those structures, and so having an understanding of how what that building needs to do for the inhabitants. I mean, that to me is sort of at the heart of interior design.
Oh, absolutely. I'm glad you said that too, because a lot of people just think it is just the fabrics, the colors, and everything. But when,
hmm
I've worked in many times with architects and they want um, nothing to do with interior designers. When it comes, sometimes they're just sour about it for some reason. But when you bring them in the beginning, and because our fields touch, so they overlap in some ways, and actually a lot of ways. But when we bring them into the beginning, it makes more for a more functional space for the end result for the client or the company, whatever you're making for it. Um,
hmm
yes, I'm glad you said that. It was awesome. So when you
Yeah,
started your company, did you start on your own or did you have a staff with you? Did you bring a
it
staff over?
was it was just me.
Dang. How hard
hmm
was that?
It was. I won't say it was hard. More than anything else, it was isolating.
Oh,
Um, I, in generally speaking, I would not recommend anyone to do what I did.
okay.
um, Now, and I say that I'll clarify that a little bit. So I had a lot of work when I opened my firm. So it was a situation where my moonlighting was bleeding into my day job, and I couldn't do both anymore. So I went to my wife and I was like, look, it's got to be one or the other. Which would you rather? I can either stay with this firm and just do the work and kind of keep my head down, or I can leave and we can take these projects and see if we can't make a business out of this. um and to her credit, I was terrified. I was like, no, really, like, tell me no. But to her credit, my wife was like, no, absolutely, we need to just trust and have faith and take this step and run with it. So she hasn't been wrong yet,
Yeah.
which is super frustrating. um but so, because it was just me, um I had like 9 signed contracts, like day one when I opened my firm. One was a 4,500 square foot house, that even to this day is like one of the most beautiful homes I've ever designed in my life. Um, and the owners who or the owners that built it, they actually sold it like a year later, like moved to Colorado, but they're even still good friends of mine.
Uh,
Um, but because there was so much work, it was just me in an office, like, with nobody else around. And that's an incredibly isolating position to be in, and I don't recommend it. So if you are going to be a solopreneur, I recommend co-working spaces. I recommend office sharing of any kind, not just working in a coffee shop type of thing. That I don't think that that's necessarily helpful. um, but you need to be around other professionals, other business owners. That isolation can get you into a rut, and then it becomes hard to interact with people after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that goes back to the creative minded people.
Mhm.
I feel like we have to be around other creative minded people or just people in general, or it just,
Yeah.
our brains aren't working. It just makes everything so much
Yep.
harder.
Well, in architecture and design, architecture and interiors, I mean, it's a collaborative process.
Yeah.
You can be the most amazing designer in the world, but if you don't have someone around you who's just breaks out the red pen every so often and says, well, what if you did, what if you thought about it this way instead? That's how we all continue to learn and grow as artists and designers.
Absolutely. There's no job that's done by one person. The general contractor comes in, the electrician comes in, they suggest stuff.
Sure. Yep.
There's no way you could have the information for every single detail for the
Yeah.
design.
Yep. Absolutely.
So, what
Absolutely.
other advice would you have for someone that wants to jump in and take their side gig to their full gig?
Uh, well, I guess the biggest piece of advice is make sure it's something that you want to do every day, all day, because I had an old boss who said to me once, he's like, working for yourself is great. You only have to work 12 hours a day. The only problem is you have to decide which 12. And the lesson there is you're gonna expect that you're gonna spend an unusually large chunk of time
Mhm.
doing lots of different things. So you're going to be doing administrative work, you're sending invoices, you're paying bills, you're writing checks, you're ordering business cards, you're ordering stationery, like whatever it is. You're updating your website. Like,
Yeah.
as a solopreneur, you are the boss, but you're also the janitor, you're the you're the office manager, you're the CEO, the CFO, the COO. I mean, the list just goes on. um, so make sure that it's really something that you love doing. Like, you want to get up every day and do whatever this thing is that you have. Whether it's design, or if it's woodworking, or I don't know, you want to be like the greatest brick mason in the world.
Mhm.
um, Make sure that you have a passion for it. Secondly, make sure you have a good attorney, somebody to help you set things up correctly. And when I say attorney, I mean like one person who you can go to. So like my attorney, I've known him for years, and like we go to lunch together. Like we go to the cigar lounge and like sit and just BS for an hour, like once a week. He's not just a service provider. So if you're going to be a solopreneur, find another solopreneur that can help you by offering good advice, legal advice, but also to make sure that your corporate structure is set up from the very beginning the right way. Some people, a DBA is just fine. Others, like us, we need that corporate protection of that personal veil, to protect our assets. And so you want to make sure that that's all done correctly and maintained correctly over time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great advice because there's so many people that make their side gig into their full gig, and it only
Mm-hmm.
lasts like a year or so just because they figure it out that they're meant to not be a boss, they're not meant to be on their own, and it's a hard pill to swallow, but it fails
Yeah.
fast. But that's great advice to actually sit down and think about what you're doing.
Yep.
When you move from your side gig to your full gig, usually when the side gig, like I have many, they're more thought out as hobbies than actually jobs. So they're
Mm-hmm.
more enjoyable. When you change to making it your full gig, did that change the enjoyment that what you did for a living?
Um, yes, but in a positive way.
Okay.
So the last firm that I worked for, before opening my own, I
Mhm.
was only there for about 6 or 7 months, and it was it was not work that was terribly exciting, um, and there were limitations on what I was allowed to do as a licensed architect for the firm. So,
Mm.
for instance, contract administration was completely off limits. Like, I was not allowed to go into the field to observe the construction of buildings that I designed and detailed, which made absolutely zero sense. Um, and not only that, but like, interns were not allowed to go to construction sites, which I'm like, if your goal is to, develop interns into young architects that will become senior architects, and you're not letting them go and see how the actual nuts and bolts go together,
Yeah.
like, there's only so much you can learn from Frank Ching's Construction Illustrated, Building Construction Illustrated. It only tells you so much until you actually get out into the field and you pick up a 2x4 and try to nail it to another 2x4. Like, really see how this stuff works. And so there was a certain level of frustration. It was also a larger corporate firm, and I had gone there from a smaller firm that I had hopes was going to be that I was going to be partner. That didn't work out for a variety of reasons.
Mm.
So when I went out on my own, it was a wonderful experience, despite the fear and anxiety and everything else, because I was in charge of the design. I was, not only that, but I was also in charge of making sure that my clients were kept up to date and they were made a part of the design process, and um, that I was serving their needs to to as high a degree as I could. Um, but then going out on the construction site again, meeting with the contractors and, reviewing the drawings and, problem solving during construction. Like that's, especially if it's a remodel or a historic project. Oh my gosh. I mean, if your architect is not on site for projects like that, something is going to go horribly wrong. And, so that, building those relationships between myself and the general contractors was, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And I really enjoyed it.
that's awesome. So one question I have, when you had your side gig and you were working for those companies, how did you promote your side jobs without them, your main company knowing? How did you market yourself?
Social media.
Okay.
Yeah. And for whatever reason, architects have never been good at marketing the process. So, if you look at my Instagram page, it's not just shiny photographs.
Yeah.
It's not just the finished product. Like we post and talk about the process, the not just what we're designing, but how we design. What challenges are we working with? What obstacles do we have to overcome? It's not just about, oh, look at this, shiny new thing that we've done. Isn't it wonderful? Like that to me is not, it's not helpful. It's not pushing the profession forward in a meaningful way. We all want, great photographs of beautiful things that we design at the end of a project, but how we get there, I think, is just as important. And being able to engage with my clients and with the public in that way through social media, I think has been incredibly valuable. And it's just something that even medium-sized firms just either aren't doing at all or aren't doing very well.
Yeah, I agree
And
with that.
I think that maybe gave me a little bit of an edge at the beginning, where my clients, I think, saw me as being a little bit more approachable, as a colleague or as a partner on their project, rather than just as, an architect or a service provider, somebody who's just, here you go, pay me. We don't, I don't ever want clients that are just transactional. I don't think that's helpful for the profession either.
Oh yeah. And being a social media manager and a consultant myself, looking at your social media, it does give you a personality to it. So lots of the time when we look at these firms' social media accounts, they look more like a Pottery Barn account or just giving you the finished product,
Yeah.
which is not relatable in any stance of, if it's another architect trying to follow you, trying to figure out what you do, or just a client in general, just when they contact you, it seems less like they're talking to a robot and to a person. And
Right.
nowadays, with as much AI we have going on right now, it's nice to see that you see all the human interaction and every step of the process that actually shows that you're doing the work and you're actually meaning what you do and you really rely on that relationship with your customer.
Yeah. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, one thing that I learned years ago, and even before I went out on my own, is to divorce my ego from the projects. And I say the projects because they're not mine. I may be the designer. I'm the facilitator that takes the wants, needs, and desires of the client and creates something out of that. It's still their project. It's their investment. It's their money. And you know, if I think if more architects kind of really grasp that, it might be a little more freeing to kind of let go of the design and be open to some more possibilities and kind of avenues of thought during that process.
Yeah, I love that. That's probably going to be the soundbite for this podcast because I think designers need to hear that too. Because I always say, stop designing for your portfolio and design for your client. It's just
That's
so
right.
many people are just wanting that pretty picture to put in their portfolio or their social media when
Yeah.
really you're doing your customer a disservice. You're not making it functional
Yep.
for them.
Yeah.
I love that.
Well, and at the end, and also at the end of the day, I think if we as designers are doing our job right, there's going to be something about every single project that is worth celebrating, worth sharing, whether it's an interesting kitchen layout or a difficult detail that gets executed during construction, or because we all have those. Let's be honest, we all have those projects that we don't necessarily want to put on our website.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
but again, if we are doing our job right, there's going to be something that's worth celebrating about every single project, and I think we need to be open to those opportunities. And what you just said is, I think, is spot on. Design for the client, not for your portfolio.
Yeah. And those ones that you don't want to put on your portfolio or in your social media, like you said, it's a win because you listen to the client and they're happy. That's really the only thing that matters. And you solved
Yeah.
whatever issue that they were having.
Yep.
So that's all that matters when it comes to our jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Good
Jeremiah,
stuff.
thank you so much for hopping on the Pro Series podcast today. I want to end with where people could find you on social media, your website, or anything else you want to promote.
Absolutely. So we're all over the place and have been pretty much since day one. Our website is www.roguearch.com. So ROGUEARCH.com. We're on Instagram, rogue.architect. If you Google Rogue Architects or Rogue Architecture or some combination thereof, interestingly enough, you'll see that there's more than one of us. We're all completely separate firms, but I think the last time I checked, there's 3 or 4 in addition to me. So we are based in Little Rock, Arkansas. There's another one in, I think, Colorado. There's another one in like Oklahoma or Missouri. And I can't remember where the other one is. I think down in Texas somewhere. But yeah, those Instagram and the website are the best ways to find us. We're also on Facebook. And yeah, happy to engage and talk to people about anything related to architecture.
Awesome. Well, Jeremiah, thank you so much again for taking time out of your day to hop on the Pro Series podcast.
Absolutely, Eric. Thank you so much for the introduction and the invitation. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, no problem at all.